It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. We had everything before us, we had nothing before us. I often start presentations to students with this quotation that comes from the opening chapter to A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. And it represents the feelings or the thoughts of a group of young people who were looking towards their future in an environment that was very unstable, was changing. Now, we fast forward to that time, which was the time of the French Revolution, right through to students here today looking towards their future. A great deal of uncertainty because as our environment changes from technological perspective, financial, economic, as times are changing, the environment in which people are going to be developing their careers and their futures is uncertain. It's exciting, but it's uncertain. So young people looking forward, as they were back in A Tale of Two Cities, are looking forward with these huge contradictions in front of themselves. So they can see ahead of them, everything ahead of them, or nothing. But the important point here is, as you're looking forward, the decision about whether you see everything ahead of you or nothing ahead of you is entirely based upon your attitude, how you see the world. In very traditional workplaces, education places, the environment was very stable, very straightforward. You'd be invited into a workplace, complete a job of work, and then be paid for it. You'd come into a classroom, you learn a set piece of knowledge, you pass your examination, and you move on. But today's world is not like that. And the expectations on students and the expectations of people in the workplace really, in a sense, are encapsulated by this quotation from Swami Vivekananda, where he said, in a day when you don't come across any problems, you can be sure you're traveling in a wrong path. What is this really saying? He's saying that what our life is essentially about is looking for problems and solutions to those problems. But in traditional ways of looking at problems and seeing a very clear way forward, today's workplace, today's classroom is very different from this. And you'll all be familiar with the expression of expecting people to think outside of the box. People are expected now, young people entering the career, people in mid-career and further in their career, expected to find new and innovative ways of dealing with situations that are in many ways familiar, and so thinking outside of the box. But sometimes when we think about this concept of think outside the box, we have a sense that there is something wrong about the box itself. But it isn't like this. The box that we're talking about really is defined, or it is a definition of who we are. So the walls of that box really are our culture, our history, our traditions, our education, our experience, all of the parts that make up who we are. So there isn't anything essentially wrong with the box. But we can find innovative ways of finding solutions to problems, whether they are personal ones or corporate ones, if we remain focusing only on the limitations of that box itself, the limitations of who we are, the limitations of our already absorbed experience or accumulated skills. It's a little bit like this. We look at this gentleman on the picture here. He has two opportunities as he's looking at the window. His eye can either stop on the window, so when we look at glass, our eyes, we can stop our vision at the glass itself and look at the window. Or if we choose, we can look through the window to see what's on the other side in terms of opportunities. And it's like that when we are looking at problems. So if we accept that going forward in our careers is a part of looking at problems and finding new innovative solutions, when we just look at the glass, we are limiting the potential outcomes from that by only looking at things in very familiar ways. In order to be innovative, creative, what we need to do then is to see through the glass, recognizing that the glass is there, recognizing that those definitions of ourselves exist, but that there are possibilities beyond the walls that we're seeing. So instead of seeing walls, perhaps seeing windows is perhaps a better way of looking at this. Now, when we're saying what the walls are and limiting ourselves, the limitations come from any definitions that go unchallenged. So here are some examples, perhaps little silly ones, but they illustrate the point, which is everybody knows that stems and leaves are green and tree trunks are brown. Well, they're not. But they may be in our own experience. But the point is, anything that becomes very, very familiar to us, whether it's because we were told or whether it's based upon our own experience, once it becomes a part of us, we are very resistant, very hesitant about challenging what we are familiar with. And there are good reasons for that. Our culture, for example, is based upon a set of behaviours, thoughts, expectations, ideals that become commonly held by a group of people. And that becomes a cohesive force. It's what holds us together as a culture. So the idea of becoming familiar with ideas, attitudes, actions is something that we shouldn't reject entirely, but also recognise that our way, or our familiar way, is not the only way. It's one way. Now, that takes me back really to thinking about this, looking towards the world with regard to saying we have everything ahead of us, we have nothing ahead of us. The decision about whether we as an individual choose to see everything ahead of us or nothing ahead of us, is absolutely determined by our attitude towards the environment in which we are living, the environment in which we're working. And here we see a whole range of attitudes here. Important to notice that attitudes are not completely stable and set in stone, but attitudes can change. But attitudes typically only change if we make that active decision to change those attitudes. Sometimes, whether it's a personal perspective or in a work perspective, we think that we can change other people's attitudes. But in fact, it's very, very difficult to do that. Someone cannot choose to be innovative just because I tell them. Someone cannot choose to be creative just because I tell them. Someone can't behave with integrity and honesty just because I tell them. So a good education institution is one that creates an environment for people to behave in ways that are rewarded towards the kind of attitudes that we would like to see in young, responsible, socially conscious citizens of the country in which we're living. And so, when we're looking at young people, and I advise young people as they're looking towards either selecting their school, going through an education program at college, institution, university level, going on to their careers and embarking upon their careers, is to think about their attitudes, to challenge their attitudes, and to look towards those attitudes that are gearing towards personal and, if it's in a business, corporate success. And perhaps the first of these attitudes really is one of self-reflection. The ability to take a look at yourself in a given situation and not be pointing fingers outwards at issues that may be happening, problems that may be taking place, but then to take a look at what is my role in this particular situation. Are there things that I can do, that I can adjust in terms of managing a particular situation, in terms of coming up with some creative solution, in coming up with managing the process of change and influencing other people? Because very often the only thing that we can change is our response to other environment or response to other people. Very difficult to change other people's responses. So this attitude of self-reflection is a very, very important one. And taking a look at how we present ourselves and how it is that we want other people to see us is something that we can manage. How is it when, for example, you go into an interview situation or you go into a management situation, particularly a change management situation, which is part of the role of every single leader? How do you want people to see you? Do you want them to see you as calm, confident, self-assured, confident? Do you want them to see you as weak, diffident, unable to make a decision? I think the difference between those two is obvious. But sometimes people don't look very carefully at themselves and how they are presenting. They maybe think of the content of what they're going to say, but not to take a look at the package. So I would say, be challenged to take a look at yourself, self-reflect. And then if what you're wanting to do is to elicit some change, be committed to the process. That is, be sure of what it is that you are thinking, that you're believing. Do your homework, be prepared. A lot of self-confidence comes from your ability to know yourself, that you know what you're talking about, you are committed to a particular outcome, and you present in that confident way that enables other people to absorb that confidence. And if you have done your homework and you are well prepared, then often from within you can come the passion. And passion is something that other people will capture. It's been said, this is not originally from me, been said that people will often forget what you look like, people will forget what you say, that they will never forget how you make them feel. And if within an audience, within a group that you are attempting to influence, whether interview or change management, if you connect with them and enable them to connect with your passion for something, you will be showing certainly part of the first stages of leadership in creating followers who will come with you because of your commitment and because of your passion. Expect in any situation and manage the change process. Then what is really important is that you focus on solutions and not the problems. I'm sure that we've all been in a situation, I certainly have, where being with a group of people who enjoy very much restating the problem, then restating the problem in more interesting words, then restating the problem in different situations, then restating the problem in even more beautiful words, and never getting to the solution. And if you wish to appear confident and ready to bring about some change, even if that's in attitudes of someone who is interviewing you, then focusing on the outcomes and the solutions is a very good attitude to bring forward. To at least be showing that you have in your mind possibilities for managing particular situations rather than simply restating solutions. And certainly when you're in a work environment, people who continue to restate problems are really very unhelpful. Unhelpful to you for your career. You will not be regarded as someone who has a future in any situation, but in terms of the corporate outcomes. The restatement of a problem very often leads to little in terms of solutions, unless the restatement is one that brings about some clarity. Connect and engage, I think I talked about that when I referred to as passion, but I put it in as an extra point because just bringing about some passion, bringing passion to a situation doesn't mean you're actually connecting. Okay? Connect and engage means that when you're bringing your commitment, your passion, your focus on solutions to the group of people with whom you're interacting, you have to pay attention to them and see what kind of response they're giving to you. Because you can bring all of these things, but if people are sleeping, it's leading nowhere. So, connecting and engaging means watching, pay attention, see people's eyes, see where they're looking, see what kind of feedback they're giving to you. And if you're in a mixed group, make sure that you are connecting with everyone in that group and not just those people from your own cultural grouping, because it's a natural thing to do to look towards people whose responses are familiar to us and set aside people whose responses may be unfamiliar. It's a natural response. So deciding for yourself, I'm going to connect with everyone who is within the group I'm operating, is a conscious decision. Learn from mistakes, I think, is an extremely important part of what it is that we do. the important part really, in a sense, is that when we make mistakes, not to get consumed with beating ourselves up constantly about that mistake, but to recognize that a mistake is simply an opportunity to learn. And when you're discussing this with other people in mistakes, find out what the impact of your mistake was on other individuals, other stakeholders, and to manage that. But at the end point, let the mistake go, but make sure that you have learned from that and that you're able to grow and bring about other changes that you may have in mind. Learn to listen is an important attitude to bring towards any interaction. I'm certain you've seen the kind of situation where there are two people who are having a conversation, or it appears to be a conversation, but it's a husband and wife get home at the end of the day, and the husband comes in and said, "Oh, I had a very, very hard day. It was very difficult." The wife said, "Well, yes, it was difficult for me. I had to pick up the children, then I had to prepare some food." Husband said, "Well, then I had a board meeting, and after the board meeting, it was really very difficult. I had to go off to some other thing." Wife said, "Yes, but then my mother came in, and we had to spend time with her." And what is happening here is not a conversation at all. It's two monologues taking place at the same time. And at the end of this, it is just noise in an environment. Learn to listen and actively listen, and when you're engaging with other people, give them feedback to indicate that you are listening. Then you engage in a useful conversation. Okay, many other attitudes that we could talk about. The critical point that I'm wanting to make really here is that you can decide on the attitudes that are portrayed to other people. You can decide to a large extent on what other people see when you bring yourself into a personal or a corporate situation. So importantly here is this: own your attitudes. Don't expect or think or blame other people for your attitudes. It is not realistic really to say to people, "Oh, you made me so angry." No one can make you angry unless you permit them to make you angry. So if you become angry because of what someone has said, you've allowed that. So own that, take ownership of your attitudes. If you do that, you'll go a long way to bringing to other people the kind of impression that it is that you want them to see. Thomas Edison said here, "I will not say I failed 1,000 times, I will say I discovered 1,000 ways that can cause failure." If you bring this attitude to your life and look towards the failures as opportunities to learn, you'll go far. Thank you very much.